The scent of roses and wolfsbane hung heavy in the air, a deliberate combination meant to honor both human and Lycan traditions at this unusual wedding. I sat alone at table 19, the farthest from the center of the reception hall, watching golden champagne bubbles rise and burst in my untouched glass. My pale blonde hair was carefully arranged to cover as much of my face as possible, a shield against the sideways glances and whispered comments that followed me like shadows. Can you believe they invited her? The words weren't meant for my ears, but my omega senses picked them up anyway, a cruel reminder of the heightened abilities that still weren't enough to earn me a place among my own kind. An omega without a pack was like a moon without a planet, unanchored, drifting, wrong, and I had been packless since the Moon Valley clan had asked me to leave 3 winters ago. Too weak, they'd said. Your presence disrupts the harmony. My fingers found the small silver pendant hanging at my throat, my grandmother's last gift before she died. Strength isn't always in fangs and claws, Emma, she had whispered, pressing the crescent moon into my palm. Sometimes it hides in the quiet spaces between heartbeats. I'd clung to those words through every rejection, every door closed in my face, every invitation that mysteriously disappeared once Pax realized who I was. Except this invitation. Mira had been my childhood friend before she ascended to beta status in the Silver Creek Pack. Before the hierarchy pulled us apart like tissue paper, her wedding invitation had arrived with a handwritten note. I'd like you there. Please come. So I had come, dressed in a pale blue dress that had cost 2 months of savings from my job at the Human Library, where no one cared what designation marked my skin at the nape of my neck. The bride and groom were dancing their first dance, bodies moving with perfect synchronicity, the mark of a true mate bond. Something I would never have. Omegas like me, deficient ones, broken ones, weren't destined for mates. We were meant for service roles, nurturers and caretakers, but even those positions had been denied to me after what happened with the pup. A hush fell over the reception hall, rippling outward like a stone dropped in still water. The air grew dense with tension and respect. I didn't need to look up to know what had caused the reaction. The scent reached me first, pine needles, mountain air, and something dangerous and electric, like the moment before lightning strikes. The Alpha King of the Northwestern Territories had arrived. I kept my eyes fixed on my plate. Royals didn't concern themselves with lone omegas. They existed in a different world, one of alliances and power plays and bloodlines. I belonged to none of those things. You're in my seat. The deep voice above me sent a shiver down my spine that I couldn't control. My omega instincts recognized the authority in those 4 simple words, even as my human mind rebelled against the presumption. I looked up, defiance battling with instinctive submission, and met eyes so intensely green they reminded me of the deep forests where I sometimes ran on full moon nights when the loneliness became too much to bear. Nathaniel Blackclaw, Lycan King of the Northwest, stood beside my table, my deliberately isolated, forgotten table, looking at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. His dark hair was swept back from a face that artists would want to sculpt, all angles and perfect symmetry, marred only by a thin scar that ran from his left temple to the corner of his mouth. He wore a black suit that hadn't come from any ordinary tailor, the fabric shifting like liquid shadow as he moved. There must be a mistake, I managed, voice barely above a whisper. This is table 19. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps, or curiosity. I'm quite aware of which table this is. His gaze moved deliberately around the empty chairs surrounding me. The question is why you're sitting here alone. Before I could answer, a commotion near the main entrance caught both our attention. A group of Lycans in formal military dress, Northern Pack insignias on their lapels, were being confronted by the bride's father. Even from this distance, I could see the hostility in their postures, the barely contained aggression. Right on schedule, the king muttered, and then inexplicably he pulled out the chair beside mine and sat down. The action was so unexpected that several nearby guests gasped audibly. He leaned toward me, close enough that I could feel the unnatural heat that all alphas radiated. What's your name? Emma, I said, then added softly, Emma Winters. Recognition flashed across his face. There and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. The Moon Valley outcast. The words were like a physical blow. I started to stand, dignity being all I had left, but his hand caught mine, keeping me in place. That wasn't an accusation, Emma Winters. His voice had softened to a rumble that seemed to resonate directly with something primal inside me. It was merely an observation. The northern delegates were being seated now, their eyes scanning the room until they locked onto the king at my side, their expressions hardened with what looked like triumph. I find myself in need of assistance, the king said, turning his full attention back to me, his hand still wrapped around mine. Political maneuverings are afoot, and I require someone beside me who won't have ulterior motives. I don't understand. It's simple. His thumb traced an absent pattern on my wrist, directly over my pulse. For the remainder of this event, I need you to act like you're with me. With you? The words came out embarrassingly breathless. A smile curved his lips, transforming his severe features into something almost approachable. As my companion, my date, if you prefer human terminology. The absurdity of the situation struck me then. The most powerful alpha in the Northwest Territories, asking a rejected Omega to pretend to be his partner. It had to be a cruel joke, another form of humiliation designed to remind me of my place. Why? I pulled my hand from his, ignoring the way my skin seemed to cool instantly at the loss of contact. Why would you ask that of me? He studied me for a long moment, and I had the uncomfortable sensation that he was seeing layers of me that even I wasn't aware existed. Because every person at this gathering has something they want from me, he said finally. Territory, alliances, favors, power. Every person except you, Emma Winters. You look at me and see an inconvenience, not an opportunity. Do you know how refreshing that is? Before I could respond, the music changed, shifting to a slower, more intimate melody. The king stood and extended his hand to me, his expression making it clear this wasn't truly a request. Dance with me, he said. And while we dance, I'll explain exactly what's happening and what I need from you. I hesitated, all too aware of the hundreds of eyes now fixed on us, the whispers already beginning to circulate through the crowd. To refuse would create a scene, drawing even more attention. To accept meant stepping into a world I didn't understand, aligning myself with forces beyond my comprehension. I placed my hand in his fingers closed around mine with surprising gentleness for a man who could shift into a beast, capable of tearing enemies apart. He led me to the dance floor, where couples parted before us like water breaking around a stone. My heartbeat hammered so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it, a frantic rhythm that betrayed my anxiety. Breathe, he murmured, as he turned to face me, one hand settling at my waist with careful precision. You're doing perfectly. I don't know how to dance like this, I admitted. Then follow my lead. He guided me into the first steps. That's all I'm asking you to do tonight. Follow my lead, and tomorrow you can return to your life as if none of this happened. But even as he spoke the words, something in his tone suggested he didn't believe them, that after tonight, nothing would return to what it had been before. I looked up into his face, searching for deception, for cruelty, for any sign that this was an elaborate game at my expense. I found none of those things. Instead, I saw calculation, determination, and something else. Something that looked almost like recognition, as though he'd been looking for something specific, and had unexpectedly found it in me. Tell me why, I said, finding courage in the strange intimacy of our dance. Tell me why you're really doing this. His gaze shifted to something over my shoulder. Because in exactly 3 days, the northern packs intend to challenge my rule, and they're watching now to see if I'm vulnerable. An unmated king is seen as incomplete, unanchored. His eyes returned to mine. For tonight, Emma Winters, you are my strength and my weakness. How you play that role may determine the future of every pack in the Northwest. The weight of his words settled over me like a heavy cloak. I was no one, a castaway, a footnote in pack politics. Yet suddenly I held power that could shape the fate of thousands. It made no sense, and yet the fierce intensity in his eyes made it impossible to disbelieve him. Why me? I whispered. Of all the wolves here, why choose the one with no connections, no influence, no strength. His hand at my waist pulled me a fraction closer. Perhaps because you're the only one with nothing to lose. He paused, then added more quietly. Or perhaps because fate has a sense of humor neither of us appreciates yet. As we turned with the music, I caught sight of Mira watching us from her place beside her new husband. Her expression a mixture of shock and something that might have been hope. Beyond her, the northern delegates tracked our every move with cold calculation. What had I stumbled into? What game was this dangerous man playing? And why had he chosen me as his piece on the board? Stop thinking so hard, the king said, amusement coloring his tone. For now, just dance with me, Emma. Tomorrow we'll worry about wars and politics and survival. So I did. I danced with the Lycan king while the moon rose outside, casting silver light through the high windows of the reception hall, illuminating us in its glow. And for the first time in years, no one looked through me as if I were invisible. Instead, they saw me in the arms of the most powerful alpha in the territories, and they wondered, just as I did, what it could possibly mean. The dance ended, but the king's hand remained at the small of my back, a warm presence guiding me through the crowded reception hall. Whispers followed us like falling leaves, a constant rustle of speculation and disbelief. The king with an omega? And not just any omega, the Moon Valley reject. It must be political, or a cruel joke. I kept my eyes forward, chin slightly raised in a posture of dignity I didn't feel. Inside, my heart raced with uncertainty. This close, I could detect layers in the king's scent that I'd missed before. Beneath the pine and power lay something darker, like freshly turned earth after rain, hinting at depths and complexities not visible on the surface. He led me to a secluded alcove near one of the tall windows, where moonlight spilled across the floor in a silver puddle, far enough from curious ears, but still visible to watchful eyes. "You're trembling," he observed, his voice low. "Wouldn't you? I've gone from pariah to the companion of the most powerful alpha in the territories in the span of an hour." I wrapped my arms around myself. "Everyone is staring. Let them stare." He reached out, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of my pale hair behind my ear. The casual intimacy of the gesture made me freeze. "They're supposed to. You still haven't told me what exactly is happening," I reminded him, finding my voice despite the strange flutter in my chest. "Or what you expect me to do." Nathaniel's expression hardened as his gaze tracked something across the room. Following his line of sight, I spotted 3 members of the northern delegation engaged in intense conversation with the groom's father, a beta with significant influence in trading circles. "The North has always been ambitious," he said after a moment. "For generations, they've believed their bloodline should rule. My ascension 5 years ago wasn't universally celebrated." "I remember," I said quietly. Everyone remembered. The battles had raged for weeks, leaving scars across both territories and packs. Hundreds had died before Nathaniel Blackclaw emerged victorious, a new king coated in the blood of his challengers. "What you don't know," he continued, "is that they've been gathering strength ever since, making alliances, stockpiling resources, moving pieces into position." "What pieces?" His eyes returned to mine, sharp and assessing. "Weapons, loyalties, and something far more dangerous, old magic." A chill ran through me despite the warmth of the room. Old magic was forbidden for good reason. Unpredictable, corrosive to both user and victim. The kind of power that demanded terrible sacrifices. 3 days from now, during the blood moon, they'll make their move, he said. They've acquired an artifact, a moonstone dagger that can reportedly sever the connection between an alpha and their inner wolf. Horror washed through me. To separate a Lycan from their wolf was worse than death. It was soul mutilation, leaving behind a hollow shell. The ultimate desecration. "How do you know this?" "I have sources." His jaw tightened. "But what I don't know is who they've planted as their assassin. It could be anyone at this gathering." I glanced around the crowded reception, suddenly seeing each smiling face as a potential threat. "And my role in all this is distraction," he said simply. "The North expects me to arrive with guards, with power. They're watching for signs of wariness, of preparation. They don't expect," he gestured between us, "a rejected omega on your arm. I finished flatly. Something flickered in his eyes, not quite regret, but recognition of the harshness of the truth. They'll underestimate me because of you. They'll assume I'm weak, distracted. And while they're dismissing me, my people will be tracking down the dagger. So I'm a decoy. I tried to keep the bitterness from my voice. Even in this bizarre scenario, I was still being used for what I lacked, not what I offered. A partner, he corrected. One they won't suspect. Before I could respond, a tall woman with striking auburn hair approached, her movements fluid with the natural grace of a born beta. She wore a forest green gown that complemented eyes the color of aged whiskey, and though her smile was warm, something calculating lingered in her gaze. "Your Majesty," she purred, ignoring me completely. "I was beginning to think you'd forgotten our dance." Nathaniel's expression revealed nothing. "Lady Vivian, I'm afraid my schedule has changed this evening." Her eyes flicked to me then, a dismissive glance that somehow managed to assess and discard me in the same moment. "I see. Perhaps another time, then." She leaned closer to the king, her perfume, something expensive and deliberately provocative, clouding the air between them. "The northern delegation seems quite interested in your new companion, as they should be." Nathaniel's arm slipped around my waist, pulling me against him with a casual possessiveness that sent my pulse racing. "Emma, this is Lady Vivian Thornfield of the Silver Lake Pack. Vivian, Emma Winters." Vivian's smile remained fixed, but her scent shifted subtly, revealing a flash of anger quickly suppressed. "Winters? I don't believe I'm familiar with that pack." "I don't have a pack," I said quietly. Her eyebrows rose. "Fascinating. How unusual for His Majesty to take an interest in a solitary individual." The pause before the final words made it clear she'd considered far less charitable descriptions. "I find solitary individuals often have the most interesting perspectives," Nathaniel replied smoothly. "They see what others miss, being unburdened by pack politics." "How philosophical of you." Vivian's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Well, I won't intrude on your perspective gathering." She turned to leave, then glanced back at me. "A word of advice, dear. The king's attention is like the moon. It waxes and wanes with predictable regularity. Don't mistake a full moon for permanence." She glided away before either of us could respond, the warning hanging in the air between us like frost. "Charming friend you have there," I murmured. "Vivienne is the daughter of my chief diplomat. She's been angling for a political mating since I took the throne." His thumb traced an absent pattern against my side where his hand rested. "She's also one of my primary suspects for the northern infiltration." My eyebrows shot up. "And you just told her exactly who I am?" "I told her exactly what I wanted her to believe," he corrected. "Now come. We need to circulate. The more people who see us together, the more effective our distraction." For the next hour, Nathaniel guided me through a complex social choreography. We spoke with pack leaders, merchants, warriors, each conversation a delicate dance of power and information. He introduced me simply as Emma, without explanation or apology, his hand never leaving some part of me, my waist, my arm, my lower back. To anyone watching, we appeared as lovers, comfortable in each other's space, sharing whispers and small, private smiles. It was all artifice, of course. Each murmured comment was actually information about the person we'd just spoken with, each smile concealing careful observation. I found myself slipping into the role with surprising ease, perhaps because it required me to be someone entirely different from myself. Not the rejected Omega, but a woman of confidence who belonged at the king's side. As the night progressed, I began to notice patterns. Certain delegates tensed when we approached. Others watched too carefully, their interest poorly disguised as casual observation. I leaned close to Nathaniel's ear, my lips brushing his skin in what would appear to be an intimate gesture. The man by the eastern entrance. Black suit, silver cufflinks shaped like wolf heads. He's been tracking our movements since we arrived at this side of the room. Nathaniel's eyes didn't follow my observation, but I felt his awareness shift. Alexander Volk, Northern General. Good catch. His breath was warm against my temple. What else have those observant eyes of yours noticed? The approval in his voice sent an unexpected warmth through me. When was the last time anyone had valued my observations rather than dismissing them? The bride's cousin, the one in the purple dress. She's been meeting northern delegates in the corridor outside the restrooms. Brief encounters, never more than 30 seconds. This time, surprise flickered across his face before he masked it. Are you certain? I nodded. 3 times now. Different delegates each time. His hand tightened slightly at my waist. That's unexpected. Diana has no known northern connections. She also hasn't touched a drop of champagne all night, despite carrying a glass everywhere, I added, and she keeps checking the eastern sky through the windows, as if waiting for the moon to reach a specific position. Nathaniel studied me with new intensity. You notice a great deal for someone who sat alone at a forgotten table. When no one notices you, you have plenty of time to notice everything else. I shrugged slightly, uncomfortable with his scrutiny. It's just observation, not power or strength. Information is its own kind of power, Emma Winters. He was silent for a moment, considering something. I'm beginning to think fate was indeed at work tonight. Before I could ask what he meant, a commotion near the main doors drew everyone's attention. A tall man with silver-streaked black hair strode in, flanked by 4 Lycans whose rigid postures marked them as warriors. The newcomer's presence seemed to suck the air from the room. His power radiated outward like heat from a bonfire, the unmistakable aura of an alpha in his prime. Dominic Frost, Nathaniel said, his voice hardening. Alpha of the Northern Territories. He wasn't supposed to be here tonight. Frost's cold blue eyes scanned the reception hall until they locked on us. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face, and he began making his way directly toward our position. Whatever happens next, Nathaniel said quietly, urgently. Trust nothing he says, and reveal nothing of yourself. Dominic can smell lies, but he can also manipulate emotions, especially fear. Keep your mind centered. Why would he care about me at all? I whispered, panic rising as the Northern Alpha approached. Nathaniel turned to face me fully, one hand rising to cup my cheek with surprising tenderness. To anyone watching, we would appear as lovers sharing an intimate moment. His eyes, however, were sharp with warning. Because, Emma Winters, you are now the most dangerous person in this room to his plans. His thumb brushed across my lower lip in a gesture that sent shivers down my spine. And I need you to continue being dangerous. Dominic Frost reached us, his smile never warming his ice-blue eyes. Your Majesty, he said, his voice deceptively smooth. What an unexpected pleasure. I don't believe I received word that you would be attending this modest gathering, Dominic. Nathaniel's acknowledgement was cool, his hand dropping from my face but remaining possessively at my waist. Last-minute decision. Sometimes even kings need a night of celebration. Frost's gaze shifted to me, and the weight of his assessment felt like ice water down my spine. Something hungry and calculating lurked behind his cordial expression. And who is this enchanting creature? He asked, though something in his tone suggested he already knew exactly who I was. Emma Winters, Nathaniel said simply, offering nothing more. Frost extended his hand to me. A pleasure, Miss Winters. Social protocol dictated I accept the gesture, but every instinct screamed against touching the Northern Alpha. Still, refusing would create a scene, drawing attention we didn't need. I placed my hand in his, bracing for the customary handshake. Instead, he raised my fingers to his lips, brushing them against my skin in a gesture that felt like a violation. The moment his skin touched mine, a strange sensation washed through me, like fingers rifling through papers, searching for something hidden. Curious, he murmured against my knuckles, his eyes never leaving mine. Very curious indeed. I pulled my hand back, fighting to keep my expression neutral, despite the unnatural cold that had spread from his touch. Beside me, I felt Nathaniel tense, a subtle shift in his posture that spoke of barely contained aggression. I wasn't aware the Moon Valley Pack produced omegas of such quality, Frost continued, his words deliberately provocative. Though I understand they didn't appreciate your particular qualities, did they, Miss Winters? How did he know about my past? The question must have shown on my face because his smile widened, revealing teeth too sharp for his human form. I make it my business to know the company my fellow alphas keep. His gaze shifted between us. Especially when that company is so unexpected. The threat beneath his words was unmistakable. Whatever game was being played between these powerful men, I had just become a primary piece on the board, and Dominic Frost was adjusting his strategy accordingly. The tension between the two alphas crackled in the air like static electricity before a storm. I stood motionless beside Nathaniel, acutely aware that I was witnessing something few ever saw. Territorial predators sizing each other up while maintaining the veneer of civilization. "I understand congratulations are in order," Frost said, his attention shifting back to Nathaniel. "Your eastern territories have been unusually productive this season, quite the achievement considering the drought." It sounded like small talk, but the underlying message was clear. "I'm watching your resources, your strengths, your vulnerabilities." "Good leadership adapts to challenges," Nathaniel replied smoothly. "Something the North might consider." Frost's smile remained fixed, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. "Indeed. Adaptation is essential for survival." His gaze flicked to me again. Some adaptations, however, are more surprising than others. Before Nathaniel could respond, the wedding coordinator announced the ceremonial cutting of the cake. The crowd's attention shifted, providing a momentary reprieve. "We shouldn't keep the happy couple waiting," Nathaniel said, his tone making it clear the conversation was over. "Enjoy the festivities, Dominic." As we turned to walk away, Frost spoke one last time. His words meant only for us. 3 nights, Blackclaw. The moon waits for no one. I felt Nathaniel's hand tense against my back as he guided me through the crowd toward the main reception area. His face revealed nothing, but the subtle shift in his scent told me everything. Beneath the calm exterior, rage and calculation warred for dominance. "He knows about the dagger," I whispered, careful to keep my expression neutral, aware we were still being watched. "Of course he knows. It's his plot." Nathaniel kept his voice low, his lips barely moving. "What concerns me is how much he knows about you." The cake-cutting ceremony was elaborate, combining human and Lycan traditions. The newlyweds fed each other pieces of cake, followed by a ritual where they shared a ceremonial cup of a dark red liquid, representing the blood that would bind their pacts. I watched the proceedings with a hollow sensation in my chest, a reminder of traditions I would never participate in. "Don't," Nathaniel murmured beside me. "Don't what?" "Don't disappear into whatever dark thoughts just crossed your mind." His fingers interlaced with mine, an unexpectedly intimate gesture. "I need you present." The casual command irritated me enough to push aside my melancholy. "I'm not one of your subjects, Your Majesty." A hint of surprise flickered in his eyes, followed by something that might have been amusement. "No, you're not. Which is precisely why I need you." The remainder of the reception passed in a blur of calculated appearances. We danced twice more, shared dessert from a single plate, and played our roles with increasing confidence. To anyone watching, we were simply a couple enjoying the celebration, the king and his unexpected companion. Only I knew how his eyes constantly scanned the room, cataloging threats and allies. Only I felt the tension in his body each time a northern delegate moved too close. Only I heard the subtle shifts in his breathing when certain names were mentioned in conversation. As the night wore on, my initial fear gave way to a strange, exhilarated alertness. There was something intoxicating about being needed, even if only as a distraction, about having purpose after so long adrift. The moon had reached its zenith when Nathaniel led me onto a secluded balcony overlooking the venue's gardens. The night air was cool against my skin, a welcome relief from the heat of the crowded hall. Below, silver moonlight transformed the manicured grounds into something wild and primeval. "You've done well tonight," he said, his voice low but no longer guarded now that we were alone. "Better than I could have hoped." "High praise from a king," I replied, trying to ignore the unexpected pleasure his approval brought. "What happens now?" Nathaniel's eyes tracked the movements of guests in the gardens below. "Now the real work begins. I have 3 days to find that dagger and uncover Frost's network before the blood moon rises, and my part in all this ends tonight." I stated what seemed obvious, ignoring the strange pang the words brought. He turned to me then, his expression unreadable in the moonlight. "Not quite." A sense of foreboding washed over me. "What does that mean?" "It means, Emma Winters, that you've been seen with me now. You've been marked." His voice was matter of fact, as if discussing the weather rather than my safety. The North knows your name, your face. If you simply return to your life tomorrow, you'll be vulnerable, a loose thread they'll feel compelled to eliminate. The implications hit me like a physical blow. So because I helped you, I'm now a target? My voice rose slightly before I caught myself. I didn't ask for any of this. No, you didn't. For the first time, regret colored his tone. But fate rarely consults us before changing our paths. Fate didn't do this, I said, anger finally breaking through my careful composure. You did this. You pulled me into your political games without warning me of the consequences. Would you have agreed if I had? He countered. Of course not. Precisely. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming in the confined space of the balcony. And now the Northern forces believe you're important to me, important enough to use against me. But I'm not, I said, the words bitter on my tongue. This is all just theater. Something shifted in his gaze then, a fleeting emotion I couldn't identify. Is it? Before I could respond, the balcony door opened, spilling light and noise into our secluded space. Mira stood in the doorway, her wedding gown gleaming in the moonlight, her expression a mixture of anxiety and determination. Your Majesty, she said, bowing her head slightly. Forgive the interruption, but her eyes darted to me, then back to Nathaniel. There's a situation requiring your attention. Nathaniel's posture changed instantly, the brief vulnerability of our conversation vanishing behind regal authority. What kind of situation? The Northern delegates, Mira said, her voice dropping to a whisper despite the music covering our conversation. They're speaking with my father-in-law about passage rights through the Eastern Valleys, with very specific timing. The Eastern Valleys, the most direct route between the Northern Territories and Nathaniel's central holdings. Passage rights during the blood moon would give Frost's forces a strategic advantage if conflict erupted. I see. Nathaniel's expression revealed nothing, but I sensed the calculations happening behind his calm exterior. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Beta Mira. She nodded, then turned to me, her expression softening. Emma, I'm glad you came tonight. The sincerity in her voice surprised me. We have so much to catch up on. Another time, perhaps, I said, offering a small smile. After Mira left, Nathaniel was silent for a long moment, staring out at the night sky. When he finally spoke, his voice had a new edge of urgency. Plans are accelerating. We need to leave. Leave? Now? I glanced back toward the reception, still in full swing. His tone left no room for argument. My security team has a vehicle waiting. We'll exit through the gardens to avoid drawing attention. The reality of what was happening finally hit me with full force. This wasn't just one evening of play acting. Whatever Nathaniel had pulled me into, it was dangerous enough to warrant immediate extraction. My simple life, my job at the library, my small apartment in the human sector, my careful isolation, all of it was about to change, perhaps irrevocably. I can't just disappear, I protested, panic rising. I have responsibilities, a job, and I'll ensure those matters are handled, he interrupted. But right now, your safety takes precedence. My safety, I repeated flatly, which wouldn't be compromised if you hadn't involved me in the first place. That's true. To my surprise, he acknowledged the point without defensiveness. And when this is over, I'll make amends for the disruption to your life. But right now, we need to move. Part of me wanted to refuse, to walk back into the reception and pretend none of this had happened, but the rational part of my mind recognized the truth in his words. I had been seen with the king, not just seen, but believed to be someone of importance to him. That made me a target, whether I liked it or not. Fine, I said, resignation replacing anger. But I want your word that when this is over, when your 3 days have passed, I can return to my life without royal interference. Something flickered in his eyes, hesitation perhaps. You have my word that you will be free to choose your own path once the threat is neutralized. It wasn't quite the assurance I'd asked for, but it was the best I was likely to get from a man accustomed to command rather than compromise. Nathaniel led me down a narrow stone staircase that descended directly from the balcony into the gardens below. The night air was filled with the scent of roses and moonflowers, their pale blooms glowing in the darkness. We moved silently through the shadowed paths, avoiding the occasional couples seeking privacy among the hedgerows. At the garden's edge, a sleek black SUV waited, engine idling quietly. A tall man with the unmistakable bearing of a warrior stood beside it, his eyes constantly scanning our surroundings. "Reyes," Nathaniel acknowledged with a nod. "Any complications?" "None, Your Majesty." The man's gaze shifted to me briefly, his expression revealing nothing. "The decoy vehicles are in position." "Good. We'll take the forest route." Reyes opened the rear door, and Nathaniel guided me inside with a gentle hand at my lower back. The interior was luxurious but understated, with tinted windows and what I suspected was bulletproof glass. Nathaniel slid in beside me while Reyes took the driver's seat. As we pulled away from the venue, I watched the lights of the reception fade into the distance. The reality of what was happening settled over me like a weight. In the space of a single evening, I had gone from invisible Omega to the apparent companion of the most powerful Alpha in the territories. And now I was being whisked away to some unknown destination, entangled in political machinations I barely understood. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice sounding small in the quiet of the vehicle. "Somewhere safe," Nathaniel replied, his attention focused on something outside the window. "Somewhere Frost's people won't think to look for us." "And where might that be?" He turned to me then, his green eyes reflecting the moonlight streaming through the windows. "The one place no one would expect me to take an Omega, especially one as unique as you." "Which is?" "The royal sanctuary at Black Mountain." His expression was solemn. "The ancestral home of Lycan kings. No Omega has set foot there in over a century." The significance wasn't lost on me. Black Mountain was legendary among our kind, a place of ancient power, where the boundaries between wolf and human, spirit and flesh, were said to blur. It was sacred ground, accessible only to those of royal blood and their most trusted advisors. "Why would you take me there?" I whispered, genuine confusion replacing anxiety. Nathaniel's gaze was steady, evaluating. "Because, Emma Winters, I believe you may be the key to more than just political distraction. The timing of our meeting tonight was no coincidence." "What do you mean?" Instead of answering, he reached out slowly, his fingers brushing the silver crescent moon pendant at my throat, my grandmother's last gift. "Where did you get this?" I instinctively covered the pendant with my hand, protecting it from his touch. "It was my grandmother's. She gave it to me before she died." "Why?" Something like confirmation flashed in his eyes. "Because that symbol, in that particular silver alloy, belongs to only one lineage, the lunar priestesses of Black Mountain, thought to have died out 3 generations ago." My fingers tightened around the pendant, the familiar curves of the silver crescent suddenly feeling foreign against my skin. "That's impossible. My grandmother was just grandmother. She worked as a healer in the human territories. A healer who gave you a royal relic and words about strength hiding in quiet places," Nathaniel said quietly. "Did she ever tell you stories about the mountain? About wolves who could speak to the moon?" A chill ran through me as forgotten memories surfaced. Bedtime tales of silver wolves who danced with moonlight, of women who could hear the stars singing. I dismissed them as fairy stories, the kind all Lycan children grew up with. "That doesn't prove anything," I insisted, though doubt had already taken root. "Half the packs have stories about moon priestesses, not with the details your grandmother would have known." His voice held absolute certainty. "Not with pendants made of silver mined from Black Mountain's heart, imbued with properties that can only be activated by someone of the bloodline." The pendant seemed to warm against my skin, though logic told me it was just my imagination, fueled by his words and the surreal events of the evening. "If what you're suggesting were true," I said carefully, "why would the Moon Valley Pack have rejected me? Why would I have spent years alone, packless, if I carried some special bloodline? Because they didn't know." Nathaniel's gaze was intense, searching my face as if looking for something specific, some feature or sign I couldn't identify. "Or perhaps they sensed something different about you, but misinterpreted it as weakness rather than untapped potential." The SUV turned onto a narrow road that wound upward into dense forest. Through the windows, I could see the massive silhouette of Black Mountain rising against the star-filled sky, its peak lost in clouds touched silver by the moon. Even if there's some truth to this, I said, trying to organize my scattered thoughts. What does it have to do with your conflict with the Northern Pax? With Frost's plans? Everything. A shadow passed over Nathaniel's face. The weapon they've acquired, the Moonstone Dagger, was originally forged by lunar priestesses as a tool for spiritual communion, not destruction. According to the old texts, only someone with priestess blood can neutralize its power. The implications hit me with dizzying force. This wasn't just about political maneuvering or using me as a distraction. If Nathaniel was right, I was being pulled into something far deeper, connected to ancient powers I'd never believed in. So tonight, approaching me at the wedding, was never about needing a companion or creating a political distraction, I said, the pieces falling into place. You recognized my pendant. You knew who I might be. I suspected, he corrected. The moment I saw the silver crescent, I knew there was a possibility, but I needed to be certain before revealing the full truth. Anger flared within me, hot and sudden. So you manipulated me, used me. I protected you, he countered, his tone sharpening. If I'd approached you directly with the truth, would you have believed me? Or would you have dismissed me as delusional and disappeared back into your carefully constructed anonymity? The accuracy of his assessment only fueled my frustration. Of course I wouldn't have believed him. It sounded like madness even now, with the evidence mounting. You had no right, I said, each word deliberate, to make that decision for me. To my surprise, Nathaniel inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the point. You're right. I didn't. But with the blood moon approaching and the lives of thousands in the balance, I made the choice I thought necessary. The vehicle rounded a sharp curve, and suddenly the road ahead was blocked by a massive fallen tree. Reyes braked smoothly, bringing us to a stop several yards from the obstruction. Stay here, Nathaniel commanded, his posture instantly alert. He exchanged a look with Reyes that communicated volumes without words. Sir, protocol dictates, Reyes began. I'm aware of protocol, Nathaniel cut him off. But if this is what I suspect, I need to assess it personally. Before I could ask what was happening, he was out of the vehicle, moving with the fluid grace of an alpha in his element. Even in human form, there was something inherently predatory about the way he approached the fallen tree. All senses clearly engaged. What's going on? I asked Reyes, who remained tensely vigilant in the driver's seat. Trap, he replied tersely, his hand moving to what I assumed was a concealed weapon. Or warning. Either way, not a natural occurrence. I peered through the windshield at Nathaniel, who was now circling the massive tree trunk, examining something on the far side that I couldn't see from my position. The forest around us seemed unnaturally quiet, as if the wildlife had been silenced by an unseen presence. Suddenly, Nathaniel froze, his head snapping up like a wolf catching a scent. In the next instant, he was sprinting back toward the vehicle, his expression grim. Move! He shouted. Now! Reyes didn't hesitate, throwing the SUV into reverse, just as the first arrow embedded itself in the tree beside where Nathaniel had been standing. More followed in quick succession, a deadly rain emerging from the darkness of the forest. Nathaniel reached the vehicle and wrenched the door open, diving inside as Reyes executed a flawless reverse turn that sent us hurtling back down the road we'd just ascended. An arrow struck the windshield, the impact creating a spiderweb of cracks in the bulletproof glass but failing to penetrate. Northern scouts, Nathaniel said grimly, pulling a phone from his jacket pocket. They've been tracking us since the wedding. How? I gasped, heart pounding with delayed terror. We were so careful. The pendant, he said, his fingers flying over the phone's screen. It has unique properties that those with the right training can sense. I should have anticipated that. Guilt flashed through me. The very keepsake I'd treasured was now endangering us. But how could I have known? Nathaniel spoke rapidly into the phone, issuing orders in a code I didn't understand before ending the call and turning his attention back to our situation. We can't take the main road to the sanctuary now, he said. They'll be watching all approaches. There's the Eastern Trail, Reyes suggested, navigating the winding road with expert precision despite our speed. It's rough terrain, but the vehicle can handle it. Too predictable. Nathaniel's eyes met mine in the dim interior. We need to separate. They're tracking the pendant, which means they're tracking Emma. My stomach dropped. You want to use me as bait? No. His response was immediate and firm. I want to use the pendant as a decoy while we take an alternate route. Understanding dawned. You want me to give up my grandmother's pendant? It wasn't a question. Temporarily, he clarified. One of my guards will take it in the opposite direction, creating a false trail while we proceed to the sanctuary. The rational part of me knew it was the logical solution, but the pendant was my last connection to the grandmother who had raised me after my parents' death. The thought of parting with it, even briefly, felt like cutting away a piece of myself. Nathaniel must have read the conflict on my face. I wouldn't ask if there were any other option, he said, his voice gentler than I'd heard before. I swear on my honor as king that it will be returned to you. The unexpected solemnity of the oath gave me pause. Alpha oaths were binding in a way humans could never understand, tied to their very essence, impossible to break without severe consequences. Slowly, I reached behind my neck and unfastened the delicate silver chain. The crescent moon pendant caught the dim light as I held it out, looking suddenly small and ordinary, despite the power Nathaniel claimed it held. His fingers brushed mine as he took it, the brief contact sending an unexpected warmth up my arm. Thank you, he said, the simple words carrying the weight of genuine gratitude. This will help protect us both. Reyes had navigated us back to what appeared to be a main road, driving at a more reasonable speed to avoid drawing attention. Nathaniel made another call, his voice low and urgent as he arranged for the pendant to be collected and used as a decoy. What happens now? I asked when he'd finished. Now we take a path they won't expect. Something in his tone made me uneasy. There's an old trail through the western forest. Not on any maps, known only to the royal bloodline. It will lead us to a hidden entrance to the sanctuary. But? His mouth quirked slightly, acknowledging my perception, but it's not accessible by vehicle. We'll need to continue on foot after a certain point. The prospect of hiking through unfamiliar forest in the middle of the night, possibly pursued by northern assassins, was far from appealing, but the alternative, being captured by Frost's people, was undoubtedly worse. How far is this trail from here? About 20 minutes' drive, Reyes answered. Then perhaps 2 hours on foot to the sanctuary entrance. 2 hours of trekking through wilderness, in a formal dress and impractical shoes. I suppressed a hysterical laugh at the absurdity of the situation. 24 hours ago, my biggest concern had been whether attending Mira's wedding would reopen old wounds. Now I was fleeing assassins and apparently connected to an ancient lineage of lunar priestesses. We drove in tense silence for the next several minutes, each lost in our own thoughts. The roads became progressively narrower and less maintained as we moved away from the populated areas into the deeper wilderness that surrounded Black Mountain. There's something else you should know, Nathaniel said eventually, breaking the quiet. About the sanctuary. The seriousness in his tone made me wary. What about it? It's more than just a stronghold or a historical site. It's a place of power, old power. He seemed to choose his words carefully. The boundary between the physical world and the spirit realm is thinner there, especially for those with certain sensitivities. Like lunar priestesses, I guessed. He nodded. If you truly carry that bloodline, you may experience things others cannot. Visions, awareness of presences, enhanced connection to your wolf. The last point struck a particularly painful chord. My connection to my wolf had always been problematic, weaker than it should be, unstable during transitions. One of the many reasons I'd been deemed deficient as an Omega. The idea that this could change was both tantalizing and terrifying. I've never experienced anything like that before, I said cautiously. You've never been to Black Mountain before, he countered. The sanctuary amplifies latent abilities. It's why the kings have always made their home there. It strengthens our connection to our wolves, enhances our natural abilities. Before I could respond, Reyes slowed the vehicle, pulling off the paved road onto a barely visible dirt track that disappeared into dense forest. We're here, he said quietly. This is as far as we can drive. Nathaniel nodded and turned to me. Are you ready? The question encompassed so much more than the immediate hike ahead of us. Was I ready to step into this new reality where I wasn't just Emma Winters, rejected Omega and library assistant, where ancient bloodlines and royal conspiracies and magical artifacts weren't just stories but my new normal? No, I wasn't ready. But I was here, and the path forward was the only one available. As ready as I can be, I answered honestly. He held my gaze for a moment longer, then nodded once, as if confirming something to himself. Then let's proceed. We exited the vehicle into the cool night air, the forest around us alive with sounds and scents that called to my wolf despite my apprehension. Nathaniel conferred briefly with Reyes, who would be taking a different route to bring reinforcements to the sanctuary. Then we were alone, the king and the supposed priestess descendant, standing at the edge of an ancient forest, with only the moonlight to guide our way. Stay close, Nathaniel said, leading me toward a narrow gap between two massive oak trees. The path isn't obvious to those who don't know to look for it. As we stepped between the trees, I felt a subtle shift in the air, like passing through an invisible curtain, the pressure changing against my skin. A shiver ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cool night air. Whatever waited for us on Black Mountain, I knew with bone-deep certainty that I would not return from it unchanged. The forest path was barely visible in the darkness, a whisper of a trail that seemed to disappear and reappear with each step. Nathaniel moved with absolute confidence, navigating by markers I couldn't detect. A certain configuration of stones, the angle of a bent tree, patterns in the moss that covered fallen logs. I followed closely, grateful when he occasionally extended a hand to help me over difficult terrain. My formal shoes had been abandoned miles back, replaced by makeshift wrappings Nathaniel had created from the torn hem of my dress. The blue fabric now resembled something closer to a knee-length cocktail dress than the elegant gown I'd started the evening in. Not much farther, Nathaniel said, pausing to let me catch my breath. The entrance is just beyond that ridge. I nodded, too winded for conversation. The climb had been steadily upward for the past hour, the air growing thinner as we ascended Black Mountain slopes. Above us, the moon hung large and luminous, seeming closer than it had any right to be. You're doing well, he added, his tone carrying genuine approval. Many would have complained or faltered by now. I've had practice being uncomfortable, I replied, the words coming out more bitter than intended. Rejection teaches resilience, if nothing else. Something flickered in his expression. Not quite pity, but a recognition that gave me pause. Yes, he said simply. It does. Before I could ask what he meant, a sound cut through the night, the distant howl of a wolf, followed by another, then several more joining in chorus. Not ordinary wolves, Lycans in wolf form, their calls carrying meaning beyond what human ears could interpret. Nathaniel tensed, his head tilting as he listened intently. Northern scouts, he confirmed grimly. They've picked up our trail sooner than I expected. Fear shot through me, sharp and cold. How? The pendant is gone. They're tracking by scent now, his jaw tightened. And they have enough of your scent from the wedding to follow. He took my hand without warning, pulling me forward with renewed urgency. We need to reach the sanctuary's boundaries. They won't be able to cross without permission. We half ran, half climbed up the increasingly steep terrain, my lungs burning and muscles screaming in protest. The howls grew closer, accompanied now by the sound of movement in the forest behind us, the crash of underbrush, the soft thud of paws on earth. There, Nathaniel said suddenly, pointing ahead to where the trees thinned. The stone circle marks the outer boundary. I could just make out a ring of tall, weathered stones standing like ancient sentinels at the edge of a clearing. Beyond them, the peak of Black Mountain rose against the night sky, its upper slopes glowing silver in the moonlight. We were less than 50 yards from the stone circle when the first wolf burst from the forest behind us. Massive and gray, with eyes that gleamed unnaturally bright in the darkness, it snarled a challenge that needed no translation. Nathaniel pushed me forward. Run for the stones. Don't stop. No matter what you hear. What about you? I gasped, even as I stumbled forward. I'll hold them back. Go! The command in his voice triggered instinctive Omega response, my feet moving before my mind could object. Behind me, I heard the distinct sound of transformation, bones reshaping, muscle and sinew reorganizing as Nathaniel shed his human form for something more primal. The snarls and growls that followed told me the king had engaged the pursuer, buying me precious seconds to reach safety. I ran, my bare feet bleeding from sharp rocks and thorns. My focus narrowed to the stone circle ahead. 20 yards. 10. The howls and growls behind me rose in volume and ferocity, joined by new voices as more northern wolves arrived. 5 yards from the nearest stone, something caught my ankle, a root or vine, sending me sprawling hard onto the forest floor. Pain shot through my palms and knees as they took the brunt of the fall. But worse was the sudden awareness of a presence directly behind me. I rolled over to find a massive black wolf with a distinctive white streak across its muzzle standing over me, its teeth bared in what seemed almost like satisfaction. Not Nathaniel. This was a northern wolf, its eyes gleaming with malevolent intelligence as it recognized its prize. Trapped between predator and sanctuary, I did the only thing my instincts allowed. I scrambled backward, crab-like, toward the nearest stone. The wolf followed with deliberate slowness, savoring my fear, allowing me to retreat just enough to prolong the hunt. My back hit the rough surface of the ancient stone, cold and unyielding against my spine. The wolf tensed, preparing to lunge for my throat, when a blur of midnight fur crashed into its side with devastating force. Nathaniel in wolf form was magnificent, larger than any Lycan I'd ever seen, with fur as black as the space between stars and eyes that burned green even in his wolf body. He stood between me and the northern wolf, his massive form radiating protective fury. The standoff lasted only seconds before the northern wolf attacked, teeth snapping for Nathaniel's vulnerable throat. What followed was too fast for human eyes to fully comprehend. A whirlwind of teeth and claws, snarls and blood, bodies colliding with bone-jarring force as the two alphas fought for dominance. I pressed myself against the stone, feeling strangely dizzy as the world seemed to shift around me. The stone at my back pulsed with unexpected warmth, a vibration running through it that resonated with something deep within my chest. Without conscious thought, my hand rose to touch the smooth surface, fingers splaying across the ancient rock. The moment my skin made contact, the world changed. Colors intensified, sounds clarified, and time itself seemed to slow. I could suddenly see patterns of energy, silvery threads running through the ground, connecting the stones in intricate webs that pulsed with power. More astonishing still was the glow emanating from within me, a soft luminescence that followed the lines of my veins, brightest over my heart. The bloodline awakens, a voice whispered, though no one had spoken. The circle recognizes its own. With perfect clarity, I understood what I needed to do. Still touching the stone, I rose to my feet and stepped fully into the circle, crossing the invisible threshold that separated ordinary forest from sacred ground. The moment I entered, the air around me shimmered like heat waves rising from sun-baked earth. Turning back toward the fighting wolves, I raised my free hand, palm outward, words forming on my lips that I'd never known but somehow recognized. "By moonlight and bloodright I deny you passage." My voice rang out, stronger and more commanding than I'd ever heard it. "This sanctuary rejects your presence." The effect was immediate and astonishing. A visible wave of energy pulsed outward from the stone circle, washing over the combatants. The northern wolf was thrown backward, as if struck by a physical force, tumbling several yards before regaining its footing. It snarled in rage and frustration, pacing at the invisible boundary it could now perceive but not cross. Nathaniel, bleeding from several wounds but still standing, backed slowly toward the circle. The northern wolf made one last desperate lunge, only to be repelled again by the barrier. With a final howl of rage, it retreated into the forest, presumably to rejoin its pack. As Nathaniel crossed into the circle, the strange heightened awareness that had gripped me began to fade. The glowing threads disappeared, the voice in my mind silenced, and the world returned to normal. Or what passed for normal after everything that had happened. My knees buckled suddenly, strength deserting me as the adrenaline and whatever power I'd briefly channeled drained away. I would have fallen if Nathaniel, now shifted back to human form and hastily dressed in the clothes he'd carried in a small pack, hadn't caught me. "Easy," he murmured, supporting my weight effortlessly. The first activation is always draining. What just happened? My voice sounded distant to my own ears. You activated the sanctuary's defenses. There was something like awe in his expression as he studied my face. Something only those with royal blood or priestess lineage can do. I saw threads of light and heard voices. He nodded, unsurprised, the sanctuary's consciousness recognizing you as its own. The implications were too enormous to process in my exhausted state. If what had just happened was real, if what Nathaniel believed about my bloodline was true, then everything I'd thought I knew about myself was wrong. We need to continue to the inner sanctuary, Nathaniel said, gently guiding me forward. You need rest, and we're still exposed here. We walked in silence through the stone circle and up a winding path that seemed to materialize before us, illuminated by an ethereal blue glow that emanated from small crystals embedded in the rock. My mind was too overwhelmed to form coherent questions, focusing instead on simply placing one foot before the other. The path opened eventually into a breathtaking sight, a massive structure built directly into the mountainside, its architecture blending seamlessly with the natural rock formations. Ancient columns carved with wolves and moons framed an entrance large enough for 20 people to walk through side by side. Beyond the entrance, warm light spilled out, a beacon in the darkness. Welcome to the royal sanctuary, Nathaniel said quietly. Your ancestral home, if I'm right about you. As we crossed the threshold, I was enveloped in warmth and the scent of pine and cedar. Guards stationed within bowed deeply to Nathaniel before their gazes settled on me with poorly concealed curiosity. Prepare the silver chamber, Nathaniel commanded one of them, and inform the council I've returned with a guest of significant importance. The next hours passed in a blur, being led to a luxurious suite of rooms, attended by staff who provided clean clothes and treated my minor injuries, served a meal I barely tasted despite my hunger. Through it all, the reality of what had happened, what was still happening, seemed impossibly distant, like a story happening to someone else. It was only later, standing alone on the balcony of my assigned chambers and looking out over the moonlit forest below, that the full weight of the day's revelations finally settled upon me. In the space of 24 hours, I had gone from rejected Omega to potential priestess, from invisible to pivotal, and in 3 days' time, during the blood moon, I would either help save the Northwestern Territories from Dominic Frost's ambitions or fail and watch Nathaniel's kingdom fall. The pendant I'd carried for years without understanding its significance was gone, but something new had awakened within me. Something that felt both terrifying and right, like remembering a truth long forgotten. I was no longer just Emma Winters, Packless Omega. I was the descendant of lunar priestesses, connected to ancient powers I was only beginning to understand. And whatever came next, whatever role I would play in the coming conflict, I would face it not as the rejected wolf I had been, but as the woman I was becoming.